50 hired guns surrounded Ezra Morgan's ranch while he tended to the dying woman who had changed everything. 3 days ago, he was just a hermit rancher. Now bullets shattered his windows as he pressed a damp cloth to Delilah Freeman's fevered brow. The Winchester felt familiar in his weathered hands. Outside, boots scraped against frozen earth. Voices carried on the wind, low and patient. They had all the time in the world. Delilah stirred beneath the worn quilt. Her dark skin glistened, with sweat despite the cold seeping through the cabin walls. The leather satchel lay beside her, clutched even in sleep. Whatever secrets it held were worth dying for. Morgan. The voice boomed across the yard. Send out the woman, and we'll let you live. Ezra didn't answer. He'd made his choice the moment he found her collapsed near his property line. The fever had broken twice, only to return stronger. She whispered things in her delirium. Names of dead people, places burned to ash, papers that could topple empires. The leader sat his horse just beyond rifle range. Dutch van der Berk wore the badge of a federal marshal, but badges could be bought. His men spread across the hillside like buzzards waiting for carrion. 50 against 1. The odds meant nothing. Ezra had faced worse. He checked his ammunition. Enough for the first wave. Maybe the second. The cabin sat in a natural bowl, surrounded by rocky outcroppings he'd spent years fortifying. They'd come hard and fast when they came. No quarter given. Delilah's eyes fluttered open, dark and deep like still water before a storm. She tried to speak but only managed a whisper. They killed my family. Her fingers tightened on the satchel. Inside, papers rustled like autumn leaves. Evidence of something that reached beyond this frozen valley. Something worth 50 lives. The papers. She breathed. Don't let them take the papers. Ezra nodded. He still didn't know her real name. Didn't know why she'd been traveling alone through country that could kill a man in a dozen different ways. But he knew innocence when he saw it. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of snow and gunpowder. Dutch's men checked their weapons. Horses stamped and snorted, eager to move. The waiting was almost over. Ezra remembered the war. Different enemy, same dance. Men died for causes they barely understood while others counted profits in distant cities. Nothing changed except the faces and the ground where blood fell. He'd sworn never to kill again. That oath felt fragile now, worn thin by circumstance. Delilah struggled to sit up. Her dress, once fine enough for a wedding, was torn and stained. But her eyes held steel beneath the fever. She wasn't just some helpless bride who'd lost her way. You don't know me, she said. Don't know what I've done. Don't matter. It will when they start shooting. Ezra moved to the window. Dutch's men were positioning themselves, surrounding the cabin in a perfect circle. Professional killers who knew their business. They'd wait for full dark, then come like wolves. 3 days ago, Ezra said, I found a woman dying in my pasture. Everything else is just noise. She almost smiled, almost. The fever was winning again, pulling her back toward darkness. But she fought it, clinging to consciousness like a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. Vincent Corleone, she whispered. Railroad man. He's been killing people, taking their land. The papers prove it. The name meant nothing to Ezra. Rich men killed poor men for land. Story old as time. But this woman had risked everything to carry proof. That meant something. Where were you headed? North. To Judge Arthur Shelby. The name hit like a physical blow. Ezra's hand tightened on the rifle stock. Arthur Shelby. His commanding officer. The man who'd abandoned him when the war turned ugly. When following orders meant burning farms and killing civilians. You know him, Delilah said. Not a question. I know him. Outside, Dutch raised his hand, the signal. His men began moving, flowing down the hillside like water finding the lowest ground. They'd probe first. Test the defenses. Then come with everything they had. Ezra thought about the judge, about promises broken and friends betrayed, about the weight of old grudges and new choices. Delilah was counting on a man who'd proven himself unreliable, but she didn't know that yet. The first shot came from the ridge, a warning shot that splintered wood near the window. Dutch's voice followed. "Last chance, Morgan. Send her out." Ezra levered around into the chamber. The sound echoed in the small cabin. Delilah's eyes found his, searching for doubt, for the moment when self-preservation would overcome decency. She wouldn't find it. "Then we do this the hard way," Dutch called. The hired guns began their advance. 50 men with nothing to lose and everything to gain. They moved like soldiers, using cover and crossfire. Professional killers earning their pay. Ezra settled into position. The fever dreams were over. The dying woman was over. Now there was only the rifle and the choice he'd made 3 days ago when he found a stranger in need. The siege had begun. 3 days earlier, the world had been quiet. Ezra Morgan rode his fence line under a pewter sky, checking for broken wire and stolen cattle. The land stretched empty in all directions, broken only by wind-carved stone and the distant promise of mountains. He preferred it that way. Solitude was armor against a world that had taken too much. The woman lay crumpled beside the creek where his property met the open range. Her dress was fine silk, now torn and muddied. Dark skin against pale earth, she looked like something precious thrown from a speeding train. Ezra dismounted slowly. His horse snorted and stepped back, sensing something wrong. The woman's breathing came shallow and quick. Fever burned in her cheeks despite the cold air. A leather satchel lay beside her, secured with a brass lock. Her fingers were wrapped around the handle. Even unconscious, she wouldn't let go. "Ma'am." Ezra knelt beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. Dark and wide, they held depths he couldn't fathom. Fear lived there, and something else. Purpose, maybe. Or desperation. "Please," she whispered. "They're coming for me." Ezra scanned the horizon. Nothing but wind and grass in the endless sky. But that didn't mean safety. Trouble had a way of finding lonely places. Who's coming? She tried to sit up, failed. The fever was winning. Her grip on the satchel tightened until her knuckles went white. "I'm a mail-order bride," she said. "Was supposed to marry Samuel Richardson. Changed my mind." The words came too practiced, too smooth. Ezra had heard enough lies in his time to recognize the taste of them. But lies could protect as well as deceive. "Where were you headed?" "North. Anywhere north." She passed out before he could ask more questions. Ezra lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she was. The satchel came with her, still locked in her grip. Whatever it contained was worth protecting. The ride back to his cabin took 20 minutes. She stirred once, muttering words he couldn't catch. Names, maybe, places. Her voice carried education, refinement. Not the sound of a woman desperate enough to marry a stranger. Ezra's cabin sat in a natural bowl, surrounded by rocky outcroppings that provided shelter from the wind. He'd chosen the location carefully. Good water, defensible position, far from the kind of people who asked questions. Inside, he laid her on his bed. The fever had worsened during the ride. She shivered beneath his thickest quilt, the satchel still clutched against her chest. "Samuel Richardson," she mumbled. "Poor man, never even met him." Ezra dampened the cloth with cool water and placed it on her forehead. Her skin burned like a forge. Whatever sickness had taken hold was serious. The nearest doctor was a day's ride away. He'd have to manage alone. The satchel drew his attention. Brass fittings, good leather, expensive. The kind of thing a wealthy woman might carry, or someone pretending to be wealthy. The lock was solid, built to keep secrets. "Don't," she said without opening her eyes. Please don't. I won't touch it. Promise me. I promise. She relaxed slightly. Trust was fragile between strangers, but sometimes it was all you had. Ezra fetched his medical supplies. Willow bark tea for the fever. Clean bandages for the cuts on her hands and knees. Outside, the wind picked up. Storm coming. He could feel it in his bones, the way old injuries ached before the weather turned. They'd be trapped together until it passed. The woman's breathing steadied as the tea took effect. Color returned to her cheeks. Her grip on the satchel loosened, but didn't release. What's your name? Ezra asked. Delilah Freeman. Another lie, probably, but names were just sounds anyway. What mattered was the person behind them. I'm Ezra Morgan. Thank you, Mr. Morgan, for helping. Just Ezra. She nodded and closed. Her eyes, sleep claimed her quickly, but it wasn't peaceful. She tossed and turned, speaking to people who weren't there. Family members, maybe, friends. The fever painted pictures in her mind that made her weep. Ezra sat by the window, watching. The storm built. Lightning flickered in the distance. The first drops of rain spattered against the glass. Soon the world would be washed clean, if only temporarily. He thought about the woman's story. Mail-order bride who'd changed her mind. Possible, but unlikely. Women who answered those advertisements were usually desperate. They didn't have the luxury of second thoughts, and her speech was too refined, too educated. She knew Latin phrases, spoke with the careful diction of someone who'd been taught proper grammar. Not the background of a woman driven to marry a stranger. The satchel sat beside the bed, brass fittings gleaming in the lamplight. Whatever was inside had driven her to collapse in the wilderness rather than surrender it. That suggested value beyond money, or danger beyond measure. The storm hit with full force near midnight. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder shook the cabin. Walls. Delilah woke screaming, her voice lost in the wind. They're burning the house, she cried. They're burning everything. Ezra moved to her side. Her eyes were open but seeing something else. Somewhere else. A place where fire devoured everything good. You're safe, he said. You're in my cabin. The storm will pass. Papa's papers, she whispered. Have to save Papa's papers. Her hand found the satchel, drew it close. Whatever was inside had belonged to her father. That much was true, at least. The fever broke near dawn. Delilah woke clear-headed but weak. She studied Ezra's face, searching for signs of deception or threat. Finding neither, she allowed herself to relax. How long was I sick? Most of the night. Storms passed. She sat up carefully, testing her strength. The satchel remained in her lap, never forgotten. Outside, the sun broke through dissipating clouds. The world looked clean and new. I should go, she said. Don't want to be a burden. You're not strong enough to travel. I'll manage. Where exactly are you going? The question hung in the air between them. Delilah's fingers traced the brass fittings of her satchel. Whatever answer she gave would be another lie. They both knew it. North, she said finally. Just north. Ezra nodded. North was direction enough. Sometimes that was all anyone had. Delilah's stories cracked open the second day. Small fissures at first, barely noticeable. She spoke of growing up on a farm, then mentioned city theaters. She talked about learning to read from her mother, then referenced books her governess had assigned. Ezra said nothing. He chopped wood. While she watched from the porch, wrapped in his heaviest coat, the satchel never left her side. You don't believe me, she said. Doesn't matter what I believe. It should. You're risking your safety. The axe bit deep into seasoned oak. Split. The grain clean through. Ezra set another log on the block, raised the blade again. Work was honest. Work didn't lie. Your hands, he said without looking up. They're soft. Delilah pulled her sleeves down, covering her palms. But he'd already seen no calluses, no scars from farm work or kitchen duty. Hands that had held pens more often than plows. I took care of myself. Most farm girls don't know Latin. She went quiet. The wind rustled through bare branches, carrying the scent of snow. Winter was coming early this year. Soon the passes would be closed, trapping them together until spring. You were listening when I was fevered. Hard not to. You quoted Virgil. Maybe I had a good teacher. Maybe you were the teacher. The words hung between them. Delilah's. Fingers tightened on the satchel. Whatever was inside rustled like autumn leaves. Papers, documents, something worth lying for. I should go, she said for the third time in 2 days. Roads are getting bad. Won't be safe much longer. Safer than staying. Ezra split another log. The sound echoed off the surrounding rocks, sharp and final. He was running out of wood. Running out of reasons to keep his hands busy. Who's Samuel Richardson? A man who wanted a wife. What kind of man? The kind who pays for what he can't earn. There was bitterness in her voice, something personal. Ezra stacked the split wood, studying her face. She was beautiful, but not in the way men usually paid for. Her beauty came from intelligence, from strength held in check. You never met him, no. Then how do you know what kind of man he is? Delilah stood abruptly. The satchel swung against her hip, heavy with secrets. She walked to the edge of the porch, staring north toward the mountains. Some men take what they want, she said. Others buy it. Richardson was the buying kind. And you decided not to sell. Something like that. The conversation died. Ezra finished stacking wood while Delilah watched the horizon. Clouds were building again. Another storm coming. The mountains would be white by morning. 2 riders appeared on the ridge that afternoon. They sat their horses at the tree line, just visible through the bare branches. Watching, waiting. Delilah saw them first. Her face went pale as fresh snow. The satchel pressed against her ribs, a shield against whatever was coming. Friends of yours? Ezra asked. No. Richardson's men? Maybe. The riders stayed put as the sun tracked across the sky. Professional watchers. They knew their business. When darkness fell, they'd either move closer or ride away. Ezra had seen their type before. We need to talk, he said. About what? About why 2 men are willing to freeze on a mountaintop to keep eyes on you. Delilah's jaw tightened. She pulled the coat closer, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. Fear lived in her bones now, deep and permanent. Richardson must really want his bride back, Ezra continued. He doesn't want me back. Then what does he want? She turned to face him. Her eyes held depths he was only beginning to understand. Pain layered over pain, old wounds covered by new ones. He wants what I took from him, the satchel. What's inside? Papers, documents, things that could ruin him. What kind of things? Delilah was quiet for a long moment. The wind moaned through the rocks, carrying the promise of snow. The riders on the ridge hadn't moved, patient as stones. I wasn't his bride, she said finally. I was his servant, educated enough to handle his correspondence, quiet enough to be invisible. You saw something you weren't supposed to see. I saw everything, read everything, learned what kind of man he really was, and you stole proof. I stole justice. The words carried weight. Ezra felt the shift in the air between them. This wasn't about a runaway bride or a jilted lover. This was about something bigger. Something that made men ride through winter to claim it. Justice for who? For people who can't speak for themselves anymore. Dead people. Dead people. The riders moved as the last light faded. Closer now, but still keeping their distance. They'd made their point. Delilah was marked. There was no escape from this high country. How many more are coming? Ezra asked. As many as it takes. Richardson has that kind of money? Richardson has that kind of fear. Ezra checked his rifle. Full magazine. Box of shells on the mantel. Enough for a fight, but not a war. If they were serious about taking her, they'd come in force. There's a town 10 miles north, he said. Sheriff might listen to reason. Sheriff's already been bought. How do you know? Because Richardson doesn't leave loose ends. The fire crackled in the stone hearth. Outside, the temperature was dropping. Snow began to fall, fat flakes that melted on contact with the ground. Soon it would stick. Soon the world would be white and quiet and deadly. I can't protect you if I don't know what we're fighting. You're not fighting anything. This isn't your battle. It is now. Why? Ezra poked at the fire with an iron rod. Sparks flew up the chimney, disappearing into the night. He'd asked himself the same question a dozen times. Why risk everything? For a woman who wouldn't tell him the truth? Because you're here, he said finally. Because you asked for help. I never asked for anything. You didn't have to. The wind picked up, rattling the windows. Snow fell harder now, beginning to accumulate on the sill. The riders would find shelter soon. Tomorrow they'd be back. Samuel Richardson, Delilah said. That's not his real name. What is? Vincent Corleone, railroad baron, land speculator. Murderer. The name meant nothing to Ezra. Rich men were. All the same. They took what they wanted and called it business. What did he do? Killed my family. Killed my neighbors. Took their land for railroad development. Your family? My father inherited property after the war. Good land, valuable land. Corleone wanted it. And when your father wouldn't sell, he sold anyway, just not to Corleone. Delilah's hand found the satchel. Her fingers traced the brass fittings, worn smooth by constant handling. Inside, papers rustled. Evidence of crimes that reached beyond this frozen valley. The satchel contains the proof, she said. Contracts, correspondence, names and dates. Everything needed to hang him. Who were you taking it to? Federal judge in Denver, Arthur Shelby. He's the only one with authority to act. Ezra's blood went cold. Arthur Shelby. His commanding officer. The man who'd left him to die in a burned-out farmhouse 20 years ago. You know him, Delilah said, reading his face. I know him. He's a good man, honest. He's a coward. He's our only hope. The fire burned low. Outside, the snow fell harder. The riders were gone, but they'd be back, tomorrow or the next day, with more men and fewer words. Shelby won't help you, Ezra said. He has to. The law is the law. The law is whatever rich men say it is. Then we'll make him listen. We? Delilah met his eyes. In the firelight, she looked older than her years. Worn by loss and hardened. By necessity. I can't do this alone, she said. I won't help you get to Shelby. Then what will you do? Ezra stood and walked to the window. The glass was frosted over, but he could see the shapes of trees bending in the wind. The storm was getting worse. Soon the passes would be closed. I'll keep you alive, he said. The bounty hunters came with the dawn. 2 men on tired horses, badges pinned to their coats. They dismounted slowly, hands resting on gun butts. Professional. Courtesy wrapped around cold purpose. Ezra met them at the door. The Winchester leaned against the frame, casual but ready. Behind him, Delilah pressed herself against the wall, clutching the satchel. Morning, the taller man said. Name's Pike. This here's Dobbs. We're looking for a runaway bride. Lot of country to search. Indeed. Woman named Delilah Freeman. Supposed to marry Samuel Richardson. Down in Colorado Springs. Changed her mind at the last minute. Pike's eyes moved past Ezra, scanning the cabin interior. Looking for signs of occupancy. Women's clothing. Extra dishes. Anything that might indicate a guest. Haven't seen any brides, Ezra said. Maybe not, but tracks lead this way. Woman on foot, moving north. Trail goes cold at your creek. Creek washes out a lot of tracks. True enough. Dobbs spat tobacco. Juice into the snow. He was younger than his partner, eager for action. His hand kept drifting to his pistol. The kind of man who solved problems with violence. Mind if we look around? Pike asked. I mind. Could make this easier for everyone. Could make it harder too. Pike smiled. Not friendly, professional. He'd done this dance before. Knew all the steps. Richardson's offering good money. $500 for the woman's return. Another $100 for her personal effects. Personal effects? Satchel she took. Contains family. Papers, sentimental value. Ezra nodded. Sentiment was expensive these days. Especially the kind that got people killed. I'll keep an eye out, he said. Appreciate it. The bounty hunters mounted up but didn't ride away. They made camp in the trees, just visible from the cabin. Close enough to watch. Far enough to avoid rifle fire. They're not leaving, Delilah said. No, they know I'm here. They suspect. What do we do? Ezra checked his ammunition. Counted cartridges. Measured distances. The bounty hunters were good at their job, but jobs could be made difficult. We wait, he said. For what? For them to make a mistake. The day stretched long and cold. Snow fell steadily, covering the ground in white silence. The bounty hunters took turns watching the cabin. Patient as undertakers, Delilah paced the small room, restless as a caged animal. The satchel bounced against her hip with each step. Whatever was inside had become her anchor and her burden. Tell me about your family, Ezra said. Why? Because I'm going to die for them. Might as well know who they were. She stopped pacing. Looked at him with eyes that held too much grief for someone so young. My father was a teacher. Bought land with his savings after the war. Good land, rich soil. Perfect for farming. What happened? Corleone wanted it for railroad development. Made an offer. Papa refused. So Corleone made a better offer. Corleone made a different offer. Sell or die. And your father? Papa believed in the law. Believed in justice. Believed good men would do good things. He was wrong. He was murdered. The words fell heavy in the small room. Outside, wind howled through the trees. The bounty hunter's fire flickered in the growing darkness. How many others? Dozen families, maybe more. All owned land Corleone needed. All refused to sell, and now they're all dead. All dead. Delilah sank into the chair by the fire. Her hands shook as she opened the satchel. Papers spilled onto the table. Deeds, contracts, letters bearing official seals. The evidence, she said. Names, dates, bank records. Everything needed to hang him. Ezra studied the documents. Legal language wrapped around simple theft. Murder dressed up as business transactions. The kind of corruption that reached from courthouses to Congress. Who else knows about this? Just me. And now you. What about witnesses? All dead, except me. Why did you survive? Corleone kept me alive. Needed someone educated to handle his correspondence. Someone who could read and write proper English. You were his secretary. I was his slave. The fire crackled. Outside, snow continued falling. The bounty hunters would be cold and uncomfortable, but they'd stay. $500 was good. Money. How long were you with him? 2 years. Long enough to learn his business. Long enough to copy his papers. He trusted you. He thought I was grateful. Thought saving my life made me loyal. What changed? Delilah pulled out a photograph, sepia-toned. A man in a suit standing beside a woman in a wedding dress. Happy faces, bright futures. My brother, she said. He escaped the massacre, made it to Denver. Started a new life. Corleone found him. Corleone found him. And killed him. And killed him. The photograph trembled in her hands. Ezra could see the resemblance now. Same intelligent eyes, same stubborn jawline, same refusal to bow to injustice. That's when you decided to run. That's when I decided to fight. By going to Judge Shelby. By going to Judge Shelby. Ezra stood and walked to the window. The bounty hunters were moving, changing positions, getting ready for something. Shelby won't help you, he said. You keep saying that. Why? Because I know him. Knew him during the war. He was a good officer. He was a coward. You're wrong. I'm right. Delilah gathered the papers, stuffing them back into the satchel. Her movements were quick, efficient. A woman used to keeping secrets. Tell me, she said. Tell you what? What happened between you and Shelby? Ezra's reflection stared back from the frosted glass. 20 years older. 20 years harder. But the eyes were the same. Still carrying the weight of old betrayals. Farmhouse outside. Atlanta, he said. Civilians inside, women and children. Orders came down to burn it. And Shelby gave the order. I refused. So you were court-martialed. So I was abandoned. Left behind enemy lines with no supplies, no support, no way home. But you survived. I survived. Maybe he was protecting you. Maybe he was covering himself. The bounty hunters were moving again. Closer this time, using the snow for cover. They'd grown tired of waiting. They're coming, Ezra said. Now? Now. Delilah stood and moved to the back wall, away from the windows, away from the line of fire. The satchel pressed against her chest, protecting secrets worth dying for. What do? We make them earn their money. Ezra levered around into the Winchester. The sound echoed in the small room. Sharp and final, the bounty hunters would hear it. Would know their quarry was armed and ready. You still think Shelby will help? I have to believe it. Why? Because without him, everyone dies for nothing. The first shot came through the window. Glass exploded inward, showering the floor with crystal fragments. Ezra returned fire, working the lever action. The bounty hunters scattered, seeking cover behind trees and rocks. Get down, he shouted. Delilah dropped to the floor. The satchel skittered across the boards, papers spilling from the open flap. Evidence of murder and corruption scattered across the cabin floor. More shots. The bounty hunters were circling, trying to find angles. They had patience and ammunition. Time was on their side. They're not trying to kill us, Delilah said. No, they want you alive, and the papers. And the papers. The shooting stopped. Pike's voice carried across the snow-covered yard. Last chance, Morgan. Send out the woman, and nobody else dies. Ezra reloaded the Winchester, counted his remaining ammunition. Enough for a fight. Not enough for a war. What do you want to do? He asked. Delilah looked at the scattered papers. Evidence of her family's murder. Proof of Corleone's crimes. The only hope for justice in a world that had forgotten the meaning of the word. I want to live long enough to see him hang. Then we fight. Then we fight. The bounty hunters began their final approach. 2 men against justice. 2 men against the truth. The odds were even. The bounty hunters never made it to the door. 50 riders crested the ridge like a black tide, swallowing Pike and Dobbs before they could cry out. The small fight became something else entirely. Dutch van der Berk rode at the head of the column. Federal Marshal's badge gleamed on his chest, but his eyes held the emptiness of a paid killer. Behind him, an army of hired guns spread across the valley floor. Different game now, Ezra said. Delilah pressed against the back wall, clutching the satchel. Her face had gone pale as winter sky. This wasn't about bounty money anymore. This was about silencing witnesses. They're not taking prisoners, she whispered. No. Dutch's voice boomed across the yard. Ezra Morgan, you're harboring a fugitive. Send out Delilah Freeman and we'll let you live. Ezra didn't answer. He was counting ammunition, measuring distances, calculating odds. 50 against 1. The numbers meant certain death. But numbers didn't always tell the whole story. You know who I am, Dutch continued. You know what I can do. I know you work for Vincent Corleone, Ezra called back. I know you murder families for railroad money. Big words from a man about to die. Bigger words from a man about to explain himself to God. The hired guns began spreading out, surrounding the cabin. Professional killers who knew their business. They'd probe for weaknesses, test the defenses, then come with everything they had. How many bullets do you have? Delilah asked. Enough for the first wave. And the second? We'll see. Ezra studied the terrain around his cabin. He'd chosen the location carefully during his hermit years. Natural defensive position. Rock outcroppings that channeled attackers into kill zones. Underground root cellar connected to the main house. This isn't just a ranch, Delilah said. No, you've been preparing for this. Not this specifically, but something like it. Why? Ezra checked his rifle sight. Adjusted for wind and distance. The hired guns were getting into position. Soon, the real shooting would start. Because men like Corleone don't leave loose ends, he said. Because the war never really ended. Just changed uniforms. What war? The one between people who take and people who give. The first shot came from the trees. Warning shot that splintered wood near the window. Dutch was giving him one last chance to surrender. I'm not Delilah. Freeman, she said suddenly. Ezra turned to look at her. Even now, with death circling the cabin, she couldn't stop lying. Then who are you? Delilah Washington, teacher, daughter of Marcus Washington, who bought his freedom and his land with blood and sweat. Why the false name? Because dead women don't need real names. The truth hit different than the lies, heavier, more dangerous. This wasn't about a runaway bride or stolen correspondence. This was about genocide dressed up as business. How? Many families, 47, maybe more. All owned land Corleone needed for his railroad. All dead, except you, except me. Another shot, closer this time. The hired guns were losing patience. Soon they'd stop asking and start taking. There's something else, Delilah said. Something I haven't told you. What? I'm not the only survivor. Ezra's finger tightened on the trigger. Outside, men were moving through the trees, getting ready for the final assault. Who else? Children, 12 of them. Hidden in a church basement in Denver. Witnesses. Witnesses. That's why Corleone sent 50 men. That's why Corleone sent 50 men. The weight of it settled on Ezra's shoulders. 12 children depending on a woman who might die in the next hour. 12 futures hanging on evidence that might burn. With the cabin, the papers, he said. Copies, I hid the originals. Where? Safe place. But if I die, those children die with me. They're not getting you. How can you be sure? Ezra moved to the gun cabinet built into the wall. Inside, weapons gleamed with oil and purpose. Winchester rifles, Colt revolvers, shotguns loaded with buckshot. Enough firepower for a small war. Because I'm not just a hermit rancher, he said. What are you? I'm the ghost of Antietam. The name hit her like a physical blow. Every soldier in the war had heard the stories. One man, one rifle. Entire companies held at bay by a sniper who moved like smoke and killed like lightning. You're supposed to be dead. I am dead. Ezra Morgan is just what crawled out of the grave. He handed her a rifle, showed her how to work the lever action. Her hands shook but held steady. Teacher's hands. Gentle hands. Now learning to kill. Can you use this? Papa taught me to hunt. This isn't hunting. No, This is justice. The shooting started in earnest. Bullets punched through the cabin walls, sending splinters flying. Ezra returned fire from multiple positions, moving between prepared rifle ports. The hired guns couldn't get a fix on him. "They're trying to flank us," Delilah said. "Let them try." Ezra disappeared into the root cellar, emerging through a hidden exit behind the woodpile. 3 hired guns were creeping toward the cabin's rear wall. They died before they knew he was there. Back inside, Delilah was holding her position. The rifle bucked in her hands, but her aim was true. Teacher's precision applied to different lessons. "How many more?" she asked. 47, give or take. Good odds. Terrible odds. Better than my family had. Dutch was reorganizing. His men, the easy assault had failed. Now they'd have to earn their money. He sent riders to the high ground, trying to establish crossfire positions. "They're adapting," Ezra said. "So are we. This isn't sustainable. They have too many men." "Then we change the game." Ezra looked at her, soot-stained face. Determined eyes, the pampered secretary was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd watched her world burn and decided to fight back. "What are you thinking?" "The dynamite in your cellar. I saw it when you went underground. That's for mining. That's for killing. Too dangerous. If we use it wrong, we die with them. If we don't use it, we die anyway." The logic was sound. Desperate, but sound. Ezra had been saving the dynamite. For a last resort, that time had come. "You'll have to get close," he said. "How close?" "Close enough to light the fuse and run." "How far do I need to run?" "Farther than you think." Delilah checked her ammunition. 3 bullets left. Not enough for a prolonged fight, but enough for what came next. When? When they make their final push. When they're all committed. How will we know? Dutch will signal. He's old school, likes to coordinate his attacks. They waited. Outside, the hired guns were repositioning, getting ready for the killing blow. 47 men against 2. The odds were impossible. But impossible odds were the only kind worth fighting. Dutch raised his hand, the signal. His men began moving from all directions, converging on the cabin in a coordinated assault. Professional. Killers earning their pay. "Now," Ezra said. Delilah grabbed the dynamite. 6 sticks. Wrapped with wire and prayer. The fuse was short. Once lit, there'd be no time for second thoughts. "If I don't make it back," she said, "you'll make it back. The children in Denver. Promise me." "I promise." She kissed him. Quick and desperate. Then she was gone, running into the teeth of the storm. The satchel bounced against her hip, carrying the evidence that would hang Vincent Corleone, if she lived long enough to deliver it. Delilah reached the woodpile as bullets whined overhead. The dynamite felt heavy in her hands, dangerous as a coiled snake. She struck the match, touched flame to fuse. The spark caught, racing toward destruction. Hired guns poured through the trees. Dutch's coordinated assault had brought them within rifle range, too close to retreat, too committed to survive what came next. "Fire in the hole," Ezra shouted. Delilah ran. The satchel bounced against her hip, papers rustling with each step. Behind her, the fuse burned shorter. Time measured in heartbeats and prayer. The explosion shattered the mountain silence. Rock and timber erupted skyward. A dozen hired guns disappeared in smoke and flame. The survivors scattered, ears ringing, tactical coordination broken. "Down!" Ezra yelled. Delilah dropped as debris. Rained from the sky, chunks of stone, splinters of wood. The detritus of violence painted the snow an ashen shadow. Dutch regrouped his remaining men, maybe 30 left. Still enough to finish the job, but the easy victory had become costly. He'd lost good men to a hermit and a schoolteacher. "You just made this personal," he called. "It was always personal." Ezra replied, The gunfire resumed. Sporadic now. Careful. The hired guns had learned respect for their quarry. They advanced by inches, using every scrap of cover. They're adapting, Delilah said. So are we. Ezra moved to the window. The explosion had changed the battlefield. New cover. New angles, new opportunities for the skilled marksman. His first shot dropped a man trying to reach the barn. The second caught another crossing open ground. The ghost of Antietam had awakened, and death followed in his wake. How many bullets left? Delilah asked. Enough. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Not weather, horses, many horses moving fast. The sound echoed off the surrounding peaks, growing louder with each passing moment. Reinforcements, Dutch said to his men. Corleone sent more. But the riders, cresting the ridge, wore different uniforms, blue wool, brass buttons, cavalry sabers gleaming in the afternoon sun. United States Army, led by a man Ezra recognized even after 20 years. Judge Arthur Shelby sat his horse at the head of the column, federal marshal's badge pinned to his coat. Behind him, real lawmen with real authority, the kind that couldn't be bought or intimidated. Stand down, Shelby commanded. You're surrounded. Dutch drew his pistol. I'm a federal marshal. These are my prisoners. You're Vincent Corleone's hired killer. Those are fake warrants. Prove it. I don't have. 2, you just confessed. The hired guns looked at each other. 30 men against a cavalry troop. The odds had shifted. Professional killers were still professionals. They knew when a job had gone bad. Drop your weapons, Shelby ordered. Most complied. A few tried to run. The cavalry rounded them up without firing a shot. 20 years of practice made the operation smooth as silk. Dutch holstered his pistol, raised his hands. But his eyes promised future violence. Men like him didn't forget. Didn't forgive. This ain't over, he said. Yes, it is, Shelby replied. Ezra emerged from the cabin, rifle in hand. Delilah followed, still clutching the satchel. They walked across the battlefield, stepping over debris and broken dreams. Hello, Ezra, Shelby said. Arthur. You look good, considering. You look older. We all do. The years fell away. 2 soldiers meeting after the war. Scarred by different battles but shaped by the same conflicts. Time had worn the edges off their anger. You came, Delilah said. I've been tracking Corleone's operation for months. Your letter finally gave me the evidence I needed. What letter? The one you sent from Colorado Springs, before you ran. Delilah's hand tightened on the satchel. I never sent a letter. Someone did. Someone who knew about the murders. Someone who wanted justice. A child stepped from behind one of the cavalry horses, small, frightened, but alive. One of the 12 hidden in the Denver church basement. I sent it, the boy said. Used the teacher's name. Figured a judge would listen to a teacher. Thomas. Delilah breathed. Miss Washington, you're safe now. How did you find me? Followed the bad men. They led us right to you. Shelby dismounted, walked to where Dutch stood in custody. The hired killer's face showed no emotion. Just professional. Interest in how the game had changed. Vincent Corleone. Shelby said, You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. I'm Dutch van der Berk. You're whoever Corleone pays you to be. But the game's over. We have witnesses, evidence, testimony from your own men. They won't talk. They already have. Amazing what federal prison time does to a man's loyalty. Delilah opened the satchel. Papers spilled onto the snow. Deeds, contracts, bank records. The documentary evidence of genocide dressed as business. 47 families, she said. All murdered for railroad development. All avenged, Shelby replied. Justice may be slow, but it's still justice. The cavalry began organizing prisoners, collecting evidence, building the case that would topple Vincent Corleone's empire. The children hidden in Denver would testify. The stolen lands would be returned. The murdered families would be remembered. What happens now? Ezra asked. Now, you both come to Denver. Testify before a grand jury. Help us finish what you started. And after? After is up to you. Ezra looked at Delilah. She met his eyes without flinching, the teacher and the hermit. The woman who'd lost everything and the man who'd found something worth fighting for. I have a school to run, she said. I have a ranch to rebuild. Might be room for both, Shelby suggested. Might be. 6 months later, children's laughter echoed across the valley. The rebuilt cabin had become a schoolhouse. The former battlefield had become a playground. The woman who'd carried evidence of murder now carried lesson plans and hope. Ezra worked the land, breaking ground for spring planting. The hermit's life was over. In its place, something better, something shared. Vincent Corleone died in federal prison. His railroad empire collapsed under investigation. The stolen lands were returned to rightful owners. Justice had been served, however late. Delilah stood in the doorway, watching her students play. The satchel sat on her desk, now filled with children's drawings instead of death certificates. The past had been honored. The future had been earned. Any regrets? Ezra asked. About fighting? About staying? None. Good. You? Just one. What's that? Should have kissed you sooner. The wind carried their laughter across the valley. Where once there had been siege and violence, now there was peace. Where once there had been death, now there was life. The teacher and the tia rancher had found something worth more than justice. They'd found each other. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.